Hello and welcome to Nbyula Talks. Before we begin, we have a few updates and reminders for you. We would love to have you be part of our Nbyula community. And you can do so by logging on to www.nbyula.com, where you can join communities related to your area of interest, register for upcoming Nbyula Talks, book one-to-one skylifts, and view other upcoming events. You can also take this opportunity to connect with fellow learners or the speaker by sending a connection request. When you connect with the speaker, you will be able to contact them directly as well as receive updates about their upcoming talks. Kindly note that during this session, you will not be able to switch on your camera or unmute your mic. To ask questions during the talk, go to the audience chat, type your question, and select Post your question. If your question has not been answered during the talk, you will be notified once it's been answered, or if your question has not been answered during the talk, you can go to www.nbyula.com and spin a quest, and your questions will be answered. Thank you for joining us today. We hope this talk broadens your horizons and takes you to new learning heights. Once again, welcome everybody to today's talk. My name is Sarah, and today we'll be discussing the errors to avoid during the IELTS speaking section. Once again, a very warm welcome to our new faces here today, and I hope you'll be able to learn something. All right, when just as I'm about to share my screen, I'm just going to share a poll with everyone. All right, sharing the poll now. And the poll is, what do you find most difficult about the IELTS speaking exam? Just have a look at the options that we have there and go ahead and vote. What do you find the most difficult about the IELTS speaking exam? Okay, is it that you don't have enough things to speak about? Is it that you're not confident enough? Or you don't know how to answer the question, or if there's anything else that you find difficult about the speaking exam, go ahead and type it in below. While we get those answers coming in. All right, you can have time throughout the talk as well to answer it. So we'll go ahead and go through what we're gonna be discussing today. So first of all, let me just give you an introduction to the IELTS, okay? For those of you who are new, who have heard about this exam for the first time, this will just be a brief summary for you. And for those of you who already know about the IELTS exam, this will just be a quick recap. So let's just break down what the IELTS stands for. IELTS stands for International English Language Testing System, and it's for those people, non-native English language speakers, who are looking to work, study, or migrate abroad. This exam tests your 4 language skills, which are your reading, your writing, your listening, and your speaking skills. And as today's title suggests, we'll be discussing the speaking section of the exam. All right. So the IELTS speaking section is basically, it has 3 parts. There are 3 parts to the exam, and also it happens in the span of 11 to 14 minutes. So these 3 parts, the total time that you'll be speaking for is maximum 14 minutes. And it's divided into 3 parts, where you'll have part 1, where it's basically your introduction and your interview. Part 2, where you'll be given a topic and a cue card, and you'll be given time to prepare the answer and have a conversation with the examiner. And part 3 is just a little bit from part 2, where you'll be discussing that topic even further. All right. It's always important to know the assessment criteria and how you're going to be assessed and how you're going to be marked during the exam, so that when you're practicing and when you're preparing for the exam, you'll know which areas you can work on and what you'll be scored on, so that you know what you'll be able to work on and practice for. So first of all, fluency and coherence, how easily you're able to speak at length and how logically you develop your ideas. So here they'll be looking for how long you're speaking for and how you develop your ideas, how it's structured, and how you presented it when you're speaking. Second of all, lexical resource. The examiner will be looking at the wide range of vocabulary that you use. Then you have pronunciation, the ability to be understood, the ability to enunciate, and how you're speaking, your intonation, everything comes under pronunciation. And last but not least, grammatical range and accuracy. The examiner will be looking at how well you present your grammar and how your sentence structures, your use of grammar, your use of a little bit upscale sentences as well. So everything will be looked at, grammatical range and accuracy in that. All right. Okay. All right. So now let's discuss the common errors that we should try and avoid during the speaking exam. Here we go. First of all, let's look at common mistakes. So as the speaking exam has 3 parts, there'll be common mistakes that can be made during each part. So we'll go through that first. Okay, so first of all, this is a big key one, silence. It's very easy to be silent during the exam, and this could happen if we don't know what to say, if we already finished answering the question and it's just a little bit of silence where we don't have enough to say, or we just suddenly blank out and we're just a little nervous and a bit scared and not too confident. Silence is one of those common mistakes that we usually often face during the exam. All right. Second of all, poor pronunciation. In the assessment criteria, we just spoke about how we will be marked on pronunciation. So sometimes we might say the word correctly, but with the use of intonation and things like that, we won't be able to pronounce things properly and we will be misunderstood in the sense what the examiner hears might not be the right word or the right way of it being said. So you might lose points there. Again, we just spoke about intonation, but if you're flat intonation, basically intonation is the ability to modulate your voice. If you're speaking in a monotone, just in one tone, again, it will be difficult for the examiner to pick out some things, especially if you have a native accent. They might not really understand what you're trying to say. So here it's always great to modulate your voice, use different tones, raise your voice when you have to, bring it down when you need to, and make sure that there's a little bit of fluctuation in the tone of your voice. And fourth of all, a common thing would be answering the wrong question. So we might get a question, the examiner might ask us something, but we might deviate and we might not answer that question. We might answer something else. So that's a very common mistake that we make during our speaking exam, answering the wrong question. All right. I just give you a minute to go through these. Okay. All right, now we're going to look at the errors that are made during part 1. As we discussed, there are 3 parts. So the first part we'll be looking at is part 1, where it is just the introduction and the interview type of scenario that you have. And we need to remember that part 1 is basically just an introduction to get you to speak. So you're not really being assessed here exactly. It's just to get you comfortable and in the zone. And the thing that you have to remember as well is that it is about common topics. So either you'd be asked about your family, your hometown, where you live, what you do, are you working or studying, what do you do, your daily routine, all these common questions, all these answers that you would know on a daily basis or things that you do on a daily basis. So it's just there to make you feel comfortable. So when you enter the exam, when you're answering the questions, it should make you feel a bit less nervous because you're speaking about things that you know. All right. So for the first error that can be made or that's usually made is failure to paraphrase. And we'll go through this bit by bit. I'm going one at a time. Length of answers, and I'll elaborate as well. Missed opportunities. All right, these 3. We'll be talking about these 3 as the common mistakes that are made during part 1 of the exam. So first of all, failure to paraphrase or not being able to paraphrase. Let's talk about what paraphrasing is. So as we see on screen, paraphrasing is expressing the meaning of maybe something written or spoken using different words, especially to achieve greater clarity. So in simpler terms, basically paraphrasing is basically summarizing what you want to say in a different way. Okay, so here's an example. If you get a question during the exam, for example, who is your favorite celebrity? And you answer, my favorite celebrity is. That is directly taking words that the examiner has said and just repeating it. And that would kind of bring your score down because you're not paraphrasing it. You're trying to show the examiner the speaking skills that you have. So instead of just picking up the same words and phrases that the examiner is saying, maybe a better answer would be, I absolutely adore whoever it is. So if you answer my favorite celebrity is Shah Rukh Khan, it's a basic answer. But if you paraphrase it and you say, I absolutely adore Shah Rukh Khan, you have a better answer and a better structured answer and a better way of putting it. Again, the way you express it also using your tone and intonation also adds to it. So the examiner gets more interested as well and will be more attentive to your answer. So as you can see, the difference between the two, you're adding a bit more words, and the way you're telling the examiner as well adds to your score. So here we go. This is a little tip for you as well and a little understanding the importance of paraphrasing. It shows confidence. So the way you say it, the way you bring out your answer, especially if it's paraphrased, when you're clear about it, it shows that you're very confident and it boosts yourself. And also it boosts your lexical resource score. Okay? All right. So the next one, length of answers. Here we're going to be discussing the two parts, whether it's too short or too long. So if your answers are too short, first of all, we'll look at too short. All right. The problem with that, or the error here, is that the questions won't be answered sufficiently. Okay. So let's take this example. If the examiner asks you, what do you do right now? Do you work or study? And you answer, I'm studying. That's it. That's all there is. The examiner doesn't have much to go by. She or he doesn't have much to mark you on, and it'll just be a series of many questions that you'll just have to keep answering. So a better answer would be, if it is, what do you do right now? Are you working or studying? You could say something like, if you're studying, you can be like, currently I'm doing my third year at such and such college. I'm studying this, and this college is located here. You can give a well-rounded answer as opposed to just giving one line. Okay, now let's talk about if your answers are too long. The issue here is that you're basically setting yourself up for more questions, and these questions could possibly be even more difficult for you to answer, right? So if you're giving a lengthy answer, let's say that they're asking about your hometown. Where is your hometown? Again, you don't want it to be too short, but you don't want it to be too long as well. Because what happens is you have follow-up questions, and these follow-up questions are getting the examiner to get you speaking, and also it's where you can show off and where you can show them that you can speak and use different vocabulary and different like sentences so that you can build your answer. But if it gets too long, you probably would have answered a few more questions beforehand. So if the follow-up question would be, what is something that you could do in your hometown? Where are some tourist attractions? What do you like most about your hometown? If you answer that in the first question itself with this question, where is your hometown? Then they'll have to keep asking you questions and you might not know the answer to those questions. So here, just appropriately answer what you were asked in a sufficient amount of detail. So crisp and clear, but also enough so that it's not too short or that it's not too long. All right? Okay, next one, missed opportunities. So here, what do I mean by it? How would you miss an opportunity? First of all, if you just answer very short answers like we just talked about, yes or no. And second of all, if you're not showcasing your vocabulary. So this speaking exam is basically for you to showcase your speaking abilities. So if you just answer short and just say yes or no, you are not showcasing your vocabulary. If there's a question that's a futuristic question like, where would you like to live? Right? You have the opportunity to show that you know how to speak in the future tense and say, currently I live here, but I would like to explore, maybe pick a different country, Japan, because I would like to try their food. I love their culture. I've been reading so much about it. You have so much more to talk about. But if you just answer very yes or no answers, you will miss that opportunity to showcase your vocabulary and your skills and your grammar and everything. So make sure that you answer the question well. You don't do it too long or too short like we just discussed, but you also don't miss opportunities to showcase all your vocabulary. Okay, now we're moving on to errors that could be made in part 2. Okay, so first of all, the major thing could be not speaking for the whole 2 minutes. Second of all, speaking more versus speaking correctly, memorizing answers, and going off topic. And also not enough content to speak about. Okay, that's number 5. All right, so let's go through it one by one. Not speaking for the whole 2 minutes. So what happens during the part 2 of the exam is that you will be given 1 minute to prepare your answers. And after that, you will have to speak for 2 minutes. All right, that's 2 whole minutes. If you speak beyond 2 minutes, don't worry about it. The examiner is keeping a tight watch on the clock and they will stop you. So don't worry if you're getting stopped because this is a timed exam. That's why the examiner is there to time you. So it's better to speak a little more than the 2 minutes than under. All right. So what happens is when you speak under, there's only so much the examiner can do to get you speaking, and then you lose marks. So make sure that you use your prep time well, that you have all whatever you want to say, you've developed your ideas, you've gone through the follow-up questions as well, and make sure you know how to answer those questions so that you give a full rounded 2-minute answer. All right. Second of all, speaking more versus speaking correctly. Now, sometimes what happens is we know so much, we want to speak so much during the exam. This also works for part 1, 2, and 3, but mainly in part 2 because this is the start of the longer answer. We think we want to cram everything that we want to say into it. What happens here is that if we are not too confident and we're not too sure about what we're saying, we tend to start speaking incorrectly. We might start making mistakes, be it grammar, be it fluency, all right, be it cohesion, tying in your ideas together, tying in your thoughts together. It starts to go haywire. So maybe just think about it. Sometimes speaking more isn't always a good idea. Make sure that you're speaking correctly first and then develop your idea and speak more. All right. Third, memorizing answers. So while you're practicing, what happens is that maybe you have written down answers and you're just cramming these things in your mind so that you can just spit it out during the exam. There are two things that can happen here. First of all, the exams or the questions that you've been practicing may not always come up during the exam, and then you'll be stuck because you have memorized an answer, but it won't really go with what the examiner is asking you. All right. Second thing, what would happen is when you're taking that 1 minute to do your notes, make your notes to prepare to speak for the 2 minutes, you might write down bullet points. You will write down bullet points. There's no way that you will probably write down a whole paragraph. And if you do, then it poses a third problem. So let's talk about when you do that first. If you write a whole paragraph answer when you're taking notes during the time given to you, the examiner will understand that you've memorized it and you're just speaking accordingly. This should be a spontaneous kind of response when the examiner speaks to you. It should be a conversation. It shouldn't be something that's memorized, or it shouldn't be something that is just spat out in one shot. All right. And then the second problem is when you're taking notes, it'll be bullet points. So you might not form the sentence correctly when you're giving out your answers. So these are the issues when you're memorizing the answers, and or if you're repeating what you've written as in the form of bullet points. So make sure that you're able to make proper sentences from your bullet pointed notes and that it comes out spontaneously, not memorized. Okay, number 4, going off topic. It is quite easy to go off topic, especially this happens during part 2 and part 3. But again, like we discussed, since part 2 is the first one where you're speaking even more, it starts off there. So you might go off topic from your hometown. You might start talking about a place where you would like to visit, for example, which probably would come in part 3, but you'll just go off topic by talking about all that. Then the examiner will have to come bring you back to the question, bring you back to the answer, and it'll just be a little bit of a mess. And you will also lose marks. So make sure that you are sticking to the topic. Use your 1-minute prep time wisely and make sure that everything that you've prepared is to the topic. So plan it accordingly, especially when you're practicing for the speaking exam. Make sure you leave enough time to do all these things. All right. And number 5, not enough content to speak about. So there might be a chance that you don't have enough that you would like to say. You might run out of things to say. So try and make sure you develop your ideas, whatever you've written down during that 1 minute, that you've developed enough ideas that could take you through to the 2 minutes. All right, maybe you have one idea and you have a lot to speak about that one idea, or maybe in the prompts, you'll have 2 prompts, you'll develop those ideas and it still might not get you to the 2 minutes. Make sure that you're in your preparation time, you have enough to say. It's better to have more to say than less to say. So remember that. All right. So that was part 1 and part 2. Now we're going to look at the errors made during part 3. All right, so part 3 of the exam, it stems off of part 2. So it'll be an even more in-depth discussion, and it'll probably be a what worldly thing. So if they're asking about your hometown, for example, and what you can do there and things like that, sometimes it'll stem off into, maybe it'll go into travel, and it'll go on to like a discussive topic about why do people travel? Why do people, what are the reasons why people want to travel abroad? Or why do we find more people traveling internationally? Something like that, a more in-depth topic. So you'll be speaking for a bit more, and it'll be again a conversation between the examiner and you, but it'll be more in depth. So you have to make sure that you have enough to speak about as well. Think about it before, while you're preparing to part 2. You can also think about the follow-up questions that'll happen in part 3, and make sure that you have a spontaneous discussion, that you can have a spontaneous discussion again and not something memorized. All right, so let's just look at the errors first. First of all, overuse of transition signals. So these are like, for example, in addition to. So even though we have this in writing, we have these phrases in speaking as well. What happens is that maybe when we're practicing, we learn all these transition signals and we want to use all of it just to boost our lexical resource score. Two things can happen here. It can either be used incorrectly or it can be used too much, as we see here, overuse of transition signals. Then it's just that you're filling your answer with all these words and you're not giving proper content. So the examiner will mark you down. First couple of times, it's fine. Make sure that you use these transition signals appropriately. All right. Second of all, asking for the examiner's opinion. Let's be clear. This exam is to test your English skills. You're not there to actually ask the examiner their opinion, and they're actually not really going to give it to you either. So make sure that when you're speaking, either part 2 or part 3, make sure that you don't really ask them for their opinion. It's very easy, maybe out of nervousness, to be like, okay, what do you think? Again, you have to remember that this is in a slightly formal context. It's not really a casual conversation. And again, the examiner is testing your skills. They don't need to give their opinion. So try and make sure that you do not ask the examiner for their opinion. All right. Number 3, matching the examiner's view and not presenting your own. So what would happen is maybe the examiner, just to have the conversation, will present their point of view and you'll say, yes, I agree. What happens then? That's all you have to say. And you can't move forward. It's better to also present your own views. If you agree, you can say that you agree and develop that agreeing point. All right, so make sure you don't just stop at I agree. Or if the examiner disagrees, and yeah, I feel the same way. It's best to just develop it and say, yes, I do feel the same way because, and give other examples. The examiner might have given one, so you can give maybe 2, 3 more examples. Fill in that time. So make sure you have enough content and enough examples and enough things to develop your answer. All right. Number 4, overdoing while presenting your views. Again, this happens when we're overexcited about the topic. We might have so much to say, so we might end up overdoing it while we present our view. So if we agree to something, this kind of goes with point number 3 as well. Do have a couple of examples, but don't overdo it. Don't have like so many that you just want to cram everything in there. Because again, if you remember, the general mistake that could be made is that you might be saying things, or in part 2, you might be saying things, but it might not be correct. So make sure that in your mind, and this comes up when you're practicing as well, make sure while you're practicing, you keep this in mind, that you know how much to say, what you would like to say, structure your answer in your head, prepare yourself for that structure so that on the day it's all clear and you will know how to answer. All right, and again, silence here as well. This happens during all parts of the exam, but it could happen even more during part 3 because it's a bit of a longer section. So you might get stuck and you might just be silent. It's okay to take a couple of seconds to just get your thoughts together. Again, it's understandable that you might feel nervous during the exam, so you just might need to hang on, just stop for a second or 2 and just recollect your thoughts and continue again. But long periods of silence is not advisable and it's not suggested because it just takes up the examiner's time. It takes up your time where you could be speaking, but instead you're being silent. There's only so much the examiner can do to get you going as well. So just try. Even if you don't have something to say, just say something like, if you're not able to understand, also just say, I'm unable to understand, but I feel like this. And maybe just kind of agree with the examiner's point and try giving something. Just buy some time with that. So just try and keep speaking, or just take a moment if you're unable to collect your thoughts, or just try and keep speaking, but avoid long periods of silence. Again, remember that this whole speaking exam lasts for maximum 14 minutes and then you're done. So again, when you're practicing, just make sure that you know what you have to say. Practice, practice, practice speaking all the time so that you'll be able to combat these errors. All right. All right, so those are the errors the general errors, the errors that we could face in part 1, part 2, and part 3. Now we're on to the audience Q&A. So this is the time where you can ask your questions. All right. And to do that, if you have any questions, all you have to do is go to the chat box, the audience chat, type in your question, and below that, it'll say post your question. So go ahead and do that. Also, we have answers in from the poll that we discussed at the beginning of the talk. So why don't we go through that as well while we wait for some questions to come in? All right, so again, the question was, what do you find most difficult about the speaking exam? And the majority have said not having enough to speak about. So let's just pause here and let's just talk about that. Let's bring up the question, what if I don't know what to say, or what if I don't have enough things to speak about? So here's what you have to do, practice. So when you're practicing for the exam, all you have to do is make sure you practice speaking, practice with whoever's around you. It could be your family, your friends, even to the mirror, just practice speaking. So first of all, you get that confidence. Second of all, do a lot of practice papers, look at different cue cards, especially for part 2 and part 3. Know how to discuss the pros and cons, know how to have a discussion, know where the discussion will go from part 2 to part 3. Practice all those things. Know how to speak about your hometown, know how to speak about other topics that might make you feel uncomfortable. Try and practice those things as well. All right. Okay, questions coming in. Okay, again, if you're not feeling confident, practice is the only way to get you confident. Go into the exam room confident, feel confident, practice a little bit before. Make sure that you know you're ready for the exam. And the only thing that I can suggest is practice. Also, the other question that could be there is, what if I don't know how to answer the question? All right, if you don't know how to answer the question, that's okay. It's all right to ask the examiner if they could repeat it. Politely ask them, could you please repeat the answer? Could you please, I'm sorry, I did not understand. Could you explain? Use different sentences, different terminologies to ask that, but also try and avoid asking it too much, as it will bring down your score, because it'll show the examiner that you're unable to understand things or unable to comprehend what they're asking. So try not to do that so often, but also you can ask the examiner in case you don't understand. Also, there was a previous Nbyula talk around the common questions about the speaking exam. So do go check that out as well. The recording is available. So yeah, do have a look at that. All right, I think we are good for the questions for today. So thank you so much for joining today's talk. I hope that it was insightful for you. I hope that you were able to learn a bit more about the speaking exam and the errors that are there and how to avoid them. If you enjoyed this talk, please do subscribe to our channel, like it, share it with anybody who you know is preparing for the IELTS. Also, you could take this opportunity to connect with each other, connect with me as well. On our website, you just have to connect. We also have communities around IELTS, so do join that community and you can discuss your queries and questions over there. If you have questions that haven't been answered during the talk, or you think of something later on, do go onto the website and post your question and it will be answered. You will be notified when your question has been answered as well. All right, thank you so much everybody for joining us today. Do join us for our next talk in the next week coming up. I'll see you then.